In this video, Serials Issues Management, I'll go through the steps for adding a new serial subscription. We'll start with the arrival of the first issue of a new print subscription. We'll search for a bibliographic record in WorldCat, and then start the Serials Issues Management process. First, let's take a look at the Serials Issues workflow. It's important to understand that some of the actions in Serials Issues Management are institution actions. And some actions are global actions affecting all libraries using WMS. The first step in the process, select a bibliographic record and add copy information, is an institution action. The second step, add the issues metadata on the Manage Issues tab, is a global action, meaning just one WMS library needs to add the issues metadata for all other libraries to receive the issue. You will need to add at least the first issue that you have to receive, if it hasn't already been added by another WMS library. The next action is an institution action. You'll go to the Receive Issues tab and start receiving. This sets the number of copies you expect to receive and the starting volume and issue for your subscription. The next action is a global action. On the Manage Issues tab, setting a publication or a prediction pattern for the serial. Again, this means that just one WMS library takes this action for all libraries. Once the publication pattern is set, the next issue of a serial will automatically be created in Manage Issues and will be available for all WMS libraries to receive. Setting a publication pattern is optional, and you won't be able to set a publication pattern for serials titles if they are published irregularly or if their frequency is not one of the available options. You can still receive these issues, but the issues will need to be added on Manage Issues by one WMS library for all libraries to receive. The last step will be to actually receive the issues, which is an institution action on the Receive Issues tab. And if a publication pattern is set, this action will trigger the creation of the next expected issue. So let's say I've just received the first two issues for a new subscription for Nature Materials. My subscription was to begin with Volume 20, Number 1, January 2021, and I've received the January and February issues. There are essentially 5 tasks in the Serials Issues Management workflow, and I described earlier how each of these are either an institution task or a global task in the opening slides. So again, the first thing to do is to find a bibliographic record and to add the copy information for my title. So I've logged on to WMS and I've selected Acquisitions. Next, to start searching for a record, I'll click Discover Items. I'll leave the data type set to Bibliographic Records and the scope set to All WorldCat, since this is a new title for which I've never added holdings before. Next, I'll click the Index dropdown and I'll select the ISSN index. So I'll enter the ISSN in the search box. And then I can click Search or just hit Enter on my keyboard. And my search results in 19 records. I can refine the results by using the facets on the left. So I'll click the checkbox for English as the language of the cataloging record. And this narrows my results to just 6 records. I can see the first 2 are for the e-periodical, but I'm looking for a print record. So I'll scroll down to view the other records. And I can see that the first record is a full-level PCC, Program for Cooperative Cataloging record. And 110 libraries have added their holdings to this record. If I want to see the full bibliographic record, I could click View Edit Metadata to open the record in Record Manager, or I could click View in Connection to see it in Connection Browser. If I hover over the blue eye information icon, I can see some additional bibliographic information such as the date of publication and the Library of Congress call number. Since I'm going to use this record, I'll copy the call number here by highlighting it, and then I'll hit Control-C on my keyboard to copy it. Now that I've found a record, I'll click on the title to get started. This takes me to the Issues screen, but I need to first add my copy information, which will include my locations and call number. So I'll click Copies on the top right side of the screen, and this takes me to the Copies screen. To get started, I need to first choose the type of holdings record I'm creating. Add item would be for a single part monograph, Add multi-part set would be if I were adding a multi-part monograph. And Add Copy is for adding a serial. So I'll click Add Copy. This takes me to the Add New Copy screen. I'll leave my branch location set to my default, the main branch, and then I'll click the Shelving Location drop-down, and I'll select the main periodical's shelving location. Next, I'll click the Call Number drop-down, and I'll select Library of Congress. Next, I'll click the Classification text box, and then I'll paste the call number that I copied using Control-V on my keyboard. Now I want to move the cutter over to the cutter text box. So I'm going to highlight that, and then I'll use Control-X on my keyboard to cut it. And then I'll click in the cutter text box, and I'll use Control-V to paste it into the correct subfield. Next, I want to change the receipt status from the default on order. So I'll click the drop-down, and I'll select Currently Received. And now I'm ready to click Add Copy. And so my copy for the main branch location is created. If I wanted to see the local holdings record in Record Manager, I could click View Edit in MARC. And if I click the title, which I'll do now, I'll go back to the Copies screen. If I had a second subscription, maybe for another location, I could add it here by clicking Add Copy again and repeating the steps I just took for my main branch copy. But I just have the one copy from my main branch, so now I'm ready to move on to the next step to start adding my issues. So to get started adding the issues that I've received, I'll need to go to Manage Issues to add the issues metadata if another library has not already added it for the issues I have for this title. So I'll click on Issues in the upper right-hand corner. On the Issues screen, there's a Receive Issues tab and a Manage Issues tab. The Manage Issues tab is where one WMS library needs to add the issues metadata. So this is a global action. And then that metadata becomes available on the Receive Issues tab for any WMS library to receive the issues. So the Receive Issues tab is for your institution metadata for the specific issues you want to receive. On this particular title, you can see that there are no issues yet on the Issues tab, which just means that no WMS library has started receiving this title. So I'll need to add the issues metadata for the first issue I have for this title. So I'll click on Add Issue. On the Add Issue screen, the issue type default is basic, which is what I want since the first issue is not an index or a supplement. For enumeration level, the default is set to 2, which is also what I want since I want to add 2 levels of enumeration for the volume and issue number. But I want to change the caption for the second level of enumeration from issue to number, so I'll click the drop-down and I'll select number. Next, I need to add the values for my 2 levels of enumeration. So I'll enter 20 for the volume, and I'll enter 1 for the number. Next, I'll click the chronology drop-down, and I'll select month, year month, since I also will enter 2 levels of chronology, and this is a monthly publication. And then the default values appear for the year and month, January 2021, which is correct for the first issue I have. If I needed to change it, I could click the drop-downs and change the month and/or year. There is also an issue preview, so I can confirm that I've entered the correct metadata. Finally, there is an expected release or shipping date, which is populated by default with the first day of the month of the issue I've just created. You can change this by clicking the calendar widget, but this is a required field because it is one of the criteria that is used to determine if an issue should appear in the missing issues list, if that date passes and you haven't received the issue. I'll leave it set at the default, and now I'm ready to click Save. And the system confirms the issue has been successfully added for all libraries. This issue will also now be available on my Receive Issues tab for me to receive. Before I actually receive the issue, however, I have to click Start Receiving on the Receive tab to indicate the number of copies I have and my starting issue. So I'll click the Receive Issues tab, and now you can see Volume 20, Number 1 is available for me to receive. But notice it says copies 0 of 0 because I haven't yet clicked Start Receiving. So I'll do that now. And for the receiving settings, I have just one copy, and my starting issue is volume 20, number 1, which is also the only issue available. If there were other issues on the Manage Issues tab, you would also see them in the drop-down here. So I just need to click Save. And the system confirms the configuration was saved successfully, and the status is now changed to Receiving. And you can also see that the copies received has now changed to 0 of 1. The next step is to set the publication pattern for this title, but keep in mind that this is a global action, meaning it is done just by one WMS library for all libraries. Also, a publication pattern should only be set for current subscriptions and never for back issues. Back issues can be added on the Copies screen. And finally, you will not be able to set a publication pattern for titles that are published irregularly or not one of the more common frequencies. For these titles, this just means that one WMS library will need to add the issue's metadata for each issue before receiving it. Whereas if there's a publication pattern set, the issue's metadata will be automatically created for the next issue after you receive an issue for your institution. Since my title, Nature Materials, is a regularly published monthly, I'll create a publication pattern which, since it's a global action, is done on the Manage Issues tab. So I'll click on the Manage Issues tab, and you can see the publication pattern currently says Not Specified. So I'll click the pencil icon to get started creating it. On the Publication Settings screen, I'll click the Publication Frequency drop-down, and I'll select Monthly. And as soon as I do that, the system proposes a publication pattern based on the frequency I selected and on the issues metadata I added for volume 20, number 1. The table shows me that the publication pattern will have 2 levels of enumeration, with the volume incrementing after 12 issues and resetting never. And for the second level of enumeration, number will reset after 12 issues. I can see the next predicted issue based on this pattern, and if it looks correct, I'll confirm by clicking Save. And now the publication pattern is set as a monthly publication. The next and final step is to receive the issues I have for my institution, which will be done on the Receive Issues tab. So I'll go back to the Receive Issues tab, and I'm now ready to receive my first issue, Volume 20, Number 1. So I'll click Receive in the Action column. Optionally, I could add a barcode, but I'm not going to barcode my issues, so I'll just click in the Received checkbox, and then I'll click Save. And the system confirms the issue has been received. And you can see that in the Copies column for this issue, it now says 1 of 1 copies received. And the Receive button has changed to Unreceive, so I can reverse this in case I've made a mistake and received the wrong issue. Also, as soon as I receive the issue, since there is a publication pattern, the next issue, Volume 20, Number 2, is automatically created. Since I also have received this issue, I'll click Receive in the Action column. And again, I'm not going to barcode, so I'll just click the checkbox on the Receive column, and then I'll click Save. And Volume 20, Number 2 is received, and the system creates the next issue, Volume 20, Number 3. If you have questions about Serials Issues Management, you can find contact information for OCLC support in your region at help.oclc.org.